You've probably heard us talking about the taper quite a lot on the channel. It's backing off your training so that you feel rested and fresh ahead of your race. But what about that final day of your taper? What should you actually do on the last day before your triathlon?
Yeah, should you rest? Should you swim, bike or run? Should you try out all your race gear? Or maybe you should just sit and eat pasta all day? It can be really tricky figuring out what to do and your game plan really in that final 24 hours. But don't worry, because we have got you covered.
We will go through the final race checks that you need to cover in a moment, but first I want to address the biggest dilemma that athletes tend to face the day before their race: to train or not to train.
Well, that was a bit of a trick question actually, because the exercise you do the day before a race isn't really, or shouldn't really be training at all. It's more about getting the body moving and preparing it as best as possible for the race day itself. It's not really about trying to get any physical training benefit. In other words, you're not going to get any fitter, or hopefully not trying to get any fitter. Now, I've seen mistakes at both ends of the spectrum here. I've seen people that have decided to go for the complete rest and do nothing, myself included. I've made that mistake. And also some people that have gone out and done far too much. And you've probably guessed it, yes, it's all about getting that perfect balance between the two.
So yes, it's about moving. It's doing some form of light exercise that's not going to tire you out. And hopefully it's going to make you feel good, or at least make you feel good the next day when it really counts. And it might sound a little bit daunting. Well, if you've got 3 sports to cover, that's going to be exhausting. Well, it's not if you follow our guidelines.
To swim or not to swim? Well, obviously this one comes down to each and everyone's personal situation. Personally speaking, I actually avoid swimming the day before a race purely for the fact that I just like to avoid all the faff of having to dry out wetsuits and whatnot. Ideally, I try and get that in maybe the day or two prior to the race itself. That said, a lot of you may not have that opportunity, and it is really good to familiarise yourself with the swim course. So if you do want to jump in the day before the race, then I advise it just being a short swim and something that allows you just to recce and suss out the start, the finish, and maybe just simple things like how the buoys align. Also, if you can, perhaps getting in on the time of the actual race start, just again so you can familiarise yourself with the conditions, currents, light. However, if your race start is super early, don't get up super early the day before, because you want to make sure you're rested and well recovered and ready to go. And then in terms of what you do in that swim, obviously you want to keep it really easy, but you may want to throw in 1, 2 short 10 to 30 second bursts just to tune up the body and get it ready for the race.
Unless you've got any real reason not to, I would highly recommend you go out on your bike for a bit of a spin. Note, I said spin, not a training session. This is now just about feeling good. So keep it to around 30 minutes, maximum 45, 50. And if you want, you can include a few short efforts, say 10 to 20 seconds a few times, just to get your cadence up and get you feeling good. But avoid any long sustained periods of effort or any hills, because you obviously don't want to tire yourself out. And this has a double benefit, and not only feeling good, but making sure your bike is great and working. It might be the only chance you get to ride it having travelled. You've had to reassemble it maybe before the race. So before you get on, do your normal checks. So make sure the brakes are working, the wheels are running true, any bolts are at the right torque. And when you do actually get out on the road, try to run through all of the gears, putting a little bit of pressure down through the pedals to check everything's working correctly. And it's a good idea for a couple of reasons to head out fairly early in the morning to get this bike done. Partly so you're avoiding any midday heat and you've got longer to make sure you rest up before the next day. But also, if there are any problems with your bike or it needs any tweaks, you've got plenty of time to do it yourself or find a mechanic before bike racking closes.
And then for the run, just keep this one super simple and super short. I see a lot of people heading out and wearing their tri-suit the day before a race. Ideally, you should have tried that tri-suit out way in advance of the race, so don't wear it the day before. Keep it fresh and ready for the next day. However, you may want to wear your running shoes or racing running shoes that you plan to wear the next day, just to get yourself in tune with them and feeling nice and happy. Now, if you're doing a bike ride as well the day before the race, then you might actually want to do the run straight off the bike, almost straight off the bike. That means you're just getting it all done in a short space of time and giving yourself time to then drop your bike off at transition, do any registration stuff, or maybe even just put your feet up for the rest of the day and chill out. Now, in terms of the run itself, Just want to make sure you're keeping this super easy, but also super short. 15 to 20 minutes is absolutely fine, but you might want to throw in some accelerations into that. And by that, I mean simply accelerating up in pace to above that target race pace that you'll be going for the next day. That's just going to help to open up the legs and get them firing ready for the race itself. So if that's of interest to you, just doing something like 20 to 30 seconds, maybe 3 or 4 times through.
So once you've done that race day tune-up, you should hopefully have still quite a lot of the day left, and you want to use this time wisely. So prioritise any last-minute changes and things you need to do. Try and get your pre-race registration done as early as you're able to get in there, and then use the rest of the time to pack your bags, check your race day nutrition, get your water bottles ready, leave them by the tap ready to refill. You basically want to do as much as you can now, and once you've ticked that off, you can really relax and just got to go, right, nothing more I can do.
But for some races, you may have to rack your bike or go to a registration, in which case, try and get in there and get out of there as quickly as possible. Basically, minimise the amount of time that you spend on your feet. That said, do familiarise yourself with transition area whilst you have the opportunity to. So get used to the flow of it, where you need to go, the mount, the dismount line, and then get yourself out there.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's really tempting to have a wander around the expo, look at all the lovely things, compare your pre-race nerves with the other athletes, maybe try and get selfies with the pros. There's just kind of like, it's a bit of sensory overload when you go to a race, especially if you've not been to one for a while. But all of this is quite mentally and physically tiring, so you want to try and remove yourself from there. Head back to your room or somewhere where you can just put your feet up. You need to remember to keep eating throughout the day. Don't go over the top, but just keep making sure you're topping up those glycogen levels, and most importantly, hydration. That is one that's easy to forget, especially if you're somewhere hot. And then once you've done everything, try to do something that can just like let your brain switch off and kind of read a book, watch a movie, whatever it is for you that can just stop you worrying about the race, because there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah, and talking of the hydration, I think that's a really important one, particularly if you're going to one of the race briefings, because you can potentially end up sat in the sun or in a tent that can quite often be quite warm. Now, on race morning itself, often quite early in triathlon, so you're going to want to make sure you get yourself to bed nice and early. However, don't go at some ludicrously early time, because the likelihood is you'll be sat there twiddling your thumbs and actually just stressing yourself out because you're not getting to sleep. But before that, you're also going to want to get yourself some dinner and some good fuel in your belly ahead of the race. And you're going to want to go for that meal plenty of time before you head to bed, just simply to allow that food to be digested and not sat in your belly. In terms of the food itself, just keep things simple here. Don't go for anything new, and maybe book ahead, because if you're at a race venue, all those Italians, they'll be fully booked straight away.
I've had that problem before, and you're like walking around everywhere and you're like, I just need some pasta, that's all I want.
Absolutely, and with that in mind, also just think about the admin for race day. So you might want to get things sorted there, getting yourself some breakfast in because the buffet may not be open, and so on and so forth. So just plan ahead and use this opportunity to get yourself sorted and nice and relaxed.
Well, this is very much a case of do as we say, not as we do, because I think we would both love to have a race prep like we've talked about, but sometimes life just gets in the way and it doesn't happen. The most important thing is not to stress. If you are really busy the day before, just try and put your feet up whenever you get the chance. And if you don't get a chance to do any exercise, well, it's not the end of the world. You've done all that hard work before. It's banked. This is just more that sort of mental preparation.
Yeah, and there are so many variables the day before a race. Every race is different. You might have a registration at a different time. So if you are completely stuck, don't feel afraid to drop a comment in this comment section just down below. Ask us any questions you like and we'll do our best to get back to you. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like. Don't forget to give us a follow over on social media and subscribe just down below.